Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Xia Taptara speaking. In this video, I'm going to show you how to color a digital art. First, we're going to start shading or rendering character using shape and clipping mask. So we're going to start off with shape, and then we are going to render that shape. When you render the shape, you have to be able to visualize what is the geometry form hidden in that shape, or break it down to plane. We're not going to render monochromatic into the final. We're just gonna render just to get the form, basic form basically. Then we are going to color over that form. I usually put the rendering halfway, and then I'm gonna start applying color on top of those. And this one take me almost 2 hours, so I'm going to split it into 2 videos. So this week we are going to just render the monochromatic or achromatic. Monochromatic and achromatic are different. Achromatic is black and white, so it's basically grayscale. Monochromatic might have a little hint of color on it, so you can render it in sepia or a little red or a little bit of desaturated color. They're not that much different, but they're quite different. All right, well, in the beginning, I'm going to explain to you my thought process, and then we're just going to start rendering this character. Alright guys, so the final in this video is going to look like this, and the second part, which will be next week, is going to be that hint of some of the rim light and some of the material rendering. Alright guys, so for on 30 minutes I got it about, well, this far. So in this one, there's 2 ways you can start. You can start with monochromatic, achromatic. Achromatic is just black and white. In this one, I start out with black and white or achromatic, and then I work my way up. And this one is from December 8th, so it might be today or yesterday, probably yesterday. But I start out with silhouette and then color it right away, so you get a better color. But a lot of time I'll start off with value first because I need to find out the lighting. You can do the same thing with color. Start off with monochromatic and expand it from there. And in the beginning, I don't think about the material yet. I have it in mind, but I like, usually I like to solve one problem at a time. So in here, you see that I have all that from the beginning. Don't think about all the material or anything yet. That comes in like much later. So first, solve your problem of the pose, right? So either you're drawing or you have a silhouette, same thing. This is just a pretty much a really quick silhouette of a Genji. And then I have a layer behind it, which is the hair. Then once I have the silhouette, I will try to resolve the issue of form. So you got a shape and you got a form here. The lighting, you can see it is the lightest part, and the light come over here, and then on the bottom you see the shadow. So the general lighting will be in this area and in that area. So then I'm gonna start adding a little bigger form first, right? Now I break the bigger form down to the smaller form, which is basically this area gonna still have the similar lighting, except I push it a little more up. So you break it down to a smaller form on top of the bigger form, but you still have to maintain the big form. Then I enhance the level a little bit to, once you have the form, then you try to gauge the material, or trying to find out how much contrast you need for the metal or the material that you are using for your design. Then after I have this, pretty much, usually I will zoom out. When you look at it close, you don't really see the form as well. But when you zoom out, you don't worry about details too much. And as I work more, then I will start to zoom in. And then when I zoom in, then I can start at this stage, start adding a little bit of detail from that spot. And then throughout, since I only have like 30 minutes, then I will try to put in as much information as I can on a certain spot, like the design and stuff, right? But with this being fan art, I don't have to design, so I don't have to think about design. I just have to follow a design that they have, and all I have to think about it just value and the design and form that would
look similar to whatever they have. I might tweaking things and changing things a little bit here and there. And then after that, I add a little bit of color on the color balance, and then increase the contrast a little bit. So that's basically what I have after about 30 minutes. Then in here is a finish, sort of finish.
So first I start out with the blank canvas with I like to start out with 70 to 80% gray. If you see my palette, it has HSP in Photoshop palette, so hue, saturation, and value. Then I'm just going to quickly using the darker value, which is about 40 to 50, to get the silhouette of the character. And as you can see, I have the reference open up because I don't know exactly what Genji really looked like. So I'm going to endorse reference, and reference is important. So at this point, I am just trying to get the proportion right. What I am focusing on right now is just the shape and the overall proportion. See if I get the length of the arm right, the shape of the head sort of right. So I'm not concerning about the detail or anything yet. I just want to give it a good pose, and then have a very good proportion. And if the pose somehow doesn't work out, then I'm just gonna switch and change it to some of the pose. But I'm trying to make it a more natural pose rather than an action pose. And as you can see, use eraser and the brush to switching or tweaking the image to give it a little more neutral sort of pose. And if the pose doesn't look right, I'm just gonna go in and delete it and erase it with the eraser, and then paint over it again until I get the flow of the character to the way I like it. And if you doing the action pose, it's going to be a little more complicated because it's going to be foreshortening maybe, or the legs and the arms are going to be slightly different, and that's going to take longer time to think and plan it out. This one is going to be quite easier than if you are trying to do the action pose. So since I'm doing the demo for 30 minutes in this one before the second part is going to be longer because I'm applying some color. So I'm just going to choose the easy way out, basically just a normal default pose. So I just want to give it a manly standing pose, basically, kind of like chest perk up a little bit, and then his arms kind of out to the side quite a bit, so it's a little more like a macho sort of pose. And in this way also, in the character design, usually you see a more standing natural pose because you want to see some detail for, say, the modeler in 3D. They can take your image and they know exactly what it is, where, before you even get into the model sheet part. The model sheet is different because the model sheet is going to be front, side, and back. But when you're doing the quick concept, then you kind of have to present it in this way with some form of a personality pose. So in the pose, you want to also give it some form of personality if you can. And if the character are in a certain area or specific location, like in cold climate or in hot climate, you also have to take that into consideration. But enough that. So now I get the pose I want. I go back into the background since the silhouette of the character and the background are on different layers. I use gradient to give it some depth into the background. And the reason I use it darker on top and the lighter on the bottom, because as you stand, your feet are going to be assuming closer to the horizontal line, and I'm assuming that this horizontal line is lower is below his waist, down below. So on the horizontal line, if you know perspective or if you paint environment, horizontal line probably is going to be the lightest part of the image most of the time. So now, and then I adjust it to the way, to the value that I wanted on the background. Now I'm working on the color or rendering on the character. And if you take a closer look, I have another layer on top of this character layer. And you can use clipping mask by hold control and click on the layers until it has the arrow. But in this one, I am using a selection tool. So I just select the silhouette below and I use Control H to hide the selection line right there. Then I'm just painting on top of it or rendering on top of it using the darker value. And the darker value I'm using is probably 20% apart. Say if the character has 40% base, I'm just going to use maybe 30% on the scale of brightness. Or if you use 60 as a base, you can use 40% as a darker. I think this is 60-40, I'm not sure. So those numbers are quite important because the more subtle you can make it in the beginning. So I like to work from the shorter range, meaning 20 to 40 before I start going darker and start going to lighter, really light. So I like to work on the mid-tone first, and then I will start adding occlusion shadow and the darker shadow and all that. And if you notice the brush I'm using, you can basically use, in the beginning I just use default brush, but as I render, you can use soft brush. It can achieve pretty similar result, or you can use any brush that has a little bit of texture on it, so it could give it some sort of a pencil rendering. If it has like the look almost as close to the pencil shading, then this should work on any brushes. Or you can go to my website and look for the brush to download. Just type in theartclass.com brush download. I'm not sure if it's still there, but most of my brush, if you want a full set, then it's probably on some of my tutorial that you can download a Gumroad or something. But if you need a brush, I could probably, if you ask me, I could probably post the link down below somewhere later. But I think most of you guys, if you're a long-time subscriber, you already have some of my brush, so feel free to share them. Now I'm start adding a little darker value now. In the beginning, you see only 2 values. Now you can see about 3 to 4. And the lighter value are not, I use it very sparingly. I'm not using it all over the place. But for the most part, the focal point that I'm focusing on is on the shoulder, the character shoulder that are closer to us, and the head. And now you can see the form, the character start taking form. Basically, you have to be able to imagine which part is a cylinder hidden in the form, or which part is the round surface or the sphere surface, which is kind of like a shoulder. And if you notice, I tend to paint kind of further away in the beginning, because if you paint too close, then you get kind of caught up on the detail rather than the big picture. So first, I want you to focus on the overall form rather than going in and trying to render every pieces of the armor. Because getting the overall form is more important than trying to render each part piece by piece, because you're not going to get the light even throughout the character. They're going to be mishap, like, you know, you're going to render this part a little lighter, that part a little darker. So you want to render the whole character all together, right? Whether it's a line art, if you're using line art, a lot of time I saw a lot of my students are too timid or afraid that they're going to ruin the line art. Don't worry about the line that are inside the character in the beginning. Just forget about it and just trying to focus on form, because those are your obstacle And sometimes you try to avoid painting over the line because you put all the effort into making those nice drawing, right? But when you are painting, you have to consider where is the shadow, and when the shadow happen, those are going to cover those lines, and it's just going to be the nature of how light and shadow works. So, but then on the bright side, you still have your line work to show, and you keep that, right? Just save it as separate file so you don't have to worry about those lines. And if you messed up, you still have the line work to show. But I would highly recommend trying to get the overall form before start going in and trying to add more detail or painting or brush up or clean up the detail afterwards, right? You want to get the overall form first, then slowly going in working from bigger piece to the smaller piece as a secondary, and then third, which is a little finer detail. So to get your first thing first, to get your proportion right as a drawing, and then you get your drawing right by proportion or get the shape right, then you have to be able to get the correct form, and those are really important, where the light is coming from. And if it's like in this one, it's basically not the directional lighting, it's just a default or a ambient lighting from the top, maybe natural light, top front, basically 45 degrees shooting down to the front of the character. So that's not too complicated. But when if you want to do a directional lighting, then you have to plan it differently. So those are going to be on the different technique. In this one, everything just going to be kind of basic and easier to follow. And now I am adding a darker value on the lower part of the mask because I want it to feel sort of like his lower mask or his mouthpiece got ripping out. Then you're gonna start noticing now that it has two different local value or local color. So one is dark and the other one is lighter. So his chest is lighter in terms of value, and then on his rib cage and on the side of his body it has darker local color. And local colors mean the base color that it came with. And then once you rendering the whole form, if you want something to get darker, you can either use multiply, which I use a lot, or I use, once you render the whole thing, right? In this case, I'm using multiply to kind of darken down just a certain part that's supposed to be darker. Maybe I usually paint 100% on the layer, and I lower the opacity on the layer itself so you get the even value. Because I know a lot of you guys have problem with when you put the stroke down, and if you have 50% on the brush, then when you put another stroke down, then it's got all that uneven value. So to solve the problem, you can just paint 100% and then lower the opacity on the layer instead, and that would be the easier way. But you have to get the correct shape and use eraser is your friend. So use eraser tool a lot, and then you're gonna achieve that result. And now I'm adding a little darker value. So when you're using those what do you call those, modifier layer, be aware that you don't want to always use them all the time. You use them to get the result that you want, and then you make another layer to normal layer on top of it and select or color picking the value or the color that you already made from those modifier. Modifier are the tool that will help you find the color or the value that you want in the easier way. And then afterwards, you're gonna have to really paint it on a normal layer eventually. And it's probably better if you paint in a normal layer, because those are gonna be the one that you're relying on the most, right? And then now I am starting to separate those pieces, or break down those pieces on top of the form that I have, and use the existing value around that area and tweak it, or kind of make it so that it fit don't go too dark or don't go too far from the existing value in the specific location that you already shade or render on the character. You can, unless it was like the darkest spot or the occlusion shadow, or it has a hold on it, right? But if it's just regular human body, which I probably will do the tutorial on those. So now I'm working on smaller pieces and breaking down into smaller detail on top of those bigger form that I already established. Once you have the bigger form and the form are clear and the value is as correct as it could be, then it will make your job easier to go in and shade or render that particular part. So as you see on the top part, it's almost there, and I'm slowly working my way down below. Usually I like to work at the overall image before I start going in and zoom in and trying to get the detail. And zooming out, if you're not used to zooming out, you're going to appreciate it a lot more once you try doing that and trying to get the big form. And as you work on the smaller part, then you start zooming in a little bit more and you're zooming in a little bit more, then you get the result you want. But once you zoom in that you can't see the whole picture, I recommend that you open up the another window so you can see the overall image when you are working on the smaller specific part, right? So, and we are almost there, and I'm not gonna, if you notice, I'm not trying to render or getting everything out. I'm just trying to get everything that you need to see in terms of, in the light you will see things, in the shadow you hardly will ever see anything or notice anything, but you still have to going into the shadow and render some of the part. And if you have any question or wondering like what kind of opacity setting I use or what kind of layer doing what, then you can go to my channel and look for what kind of opacity and value picking, how do I do that. Then you can go to my channel and look for those tutorials. I have a tutorial on opacity and flow, and then the other one is how to choose your color or pick your light color and your shadow color, how to calculate those things. So those are also on my channel. And if you have any question, post them down in the comment and I'll try to get back to you as much as I can. And I'm getting better these days about replying, even though I'm still kind of busy. And now I'm adding the hair, which is on a different layer. And I'm slowly zooming in. As you can see now, I'm zooming in almost at his full, almost as the full screen. But in this video tutorial, I'm not gonna zoom in so that on the specific part, I'm just gonna show you the overall. So you get the big idea rather than trying to go in and milking those specific part and trying to make those look nice. So this is a little more, to me, a little more efficient and a little more a little faster and have a better workflow, because these are the workflow that I use when I'm designing a character for a video game company or for a film. So now as I separate those parts more, now I'm thinking about the material and I'm trying to clean up those material to make some part look a little more like metal and some part look a little more like those are probably, I'm not sure if it's leather, but some kind of softer matte material on the side, I guess. I'm not sure what they're called. So now I'm just kind of slowly working my way and trying to get everything all covered in this character design and trying to make it look as good as I can. All right, guys, I guess in this part we are going to stop here, and then I will have part 2, which is coloring, next week. Maybe just a little bit more on the chest. There are some significant part that I want to make sure that it looks right.
Just do that. All right, so we're almost done. Hey, you draw too. What's going on? you kind of late. We are kind of done. You draw too. All right, everybody, did you guys post and post the link?
Yes.
Oh, you guys did. Okay. Philip, Philip's cooking up some awesome stuff.
He is.
2 more minutes and
And then I would probably like maybe continue this one on Discord. I'm not Discord, but maybe on Twitch. I'm not sure. But oh fuck, forgot to put color. Oops, I mean beep. I forgot to put color. This is PG. I cuss a lot, so sorry guys. Oh, and I forgot the sword. So left, right, left. Maybe here. Alright guys, I'm gonna show this guy stuff, so I guess I'm done here. So this is pretty much it. A quick sketch. It's very hard. Oh nice, Bo. It's turned out well today.
Thanks, man.
You are getting better.
Alright, here is the end of part 1. That's the final rendering of the achromatic or monochromatic Genji. Next week we are going to color them, so or I'm gonna upload the video on coloring this guy. So just look for the same name, Photoshop coloring tutorial, rendering character using shape and clipping mask, maybe part 2, or just coloring character. So yeah, all right, well, have a great day. Bye bye.